There are few things in football that is as mysterious as the flex defense.
Everything in defense and offense is evolution.
As difficult as it took me to make this video, it's going to be even harder for you to understand it, but we'll try to get through it. But before I get into the philosophy of the flex defense, we have to go back, like way back to the 40s and 50s. Just after World War II, Vince Lombardi took a head coaching job at his alma mater, Fordham University. When Lombardi arrived at Fordham, he brought in a concept known as the T formation.
Here's the Notre Dame style of play. That's the T.
The T formation was one of the more complex schemes of the 40s and 50s. It allowed for 3 backs in the backfield. Most of the runs were ran off tackle lanes with a pulling guard. Because Fordham struggled in the red zone the year before, the concept was mostly meant to be successful in the red zone and on short yardage plays. Lombardi was known to be a perfectionist, like seriously. One day he practiced the T formation for hours on into the evening. Lombardi made his backs run 33 left off the tackle and 34 right off the tackle for hours. Eventually, running left started to become difficult for lead fullback Larry Higgins. According to Higgins, he was having a hard time seeing the lanes on the left side because there was no reflection of the sun. At times, he would run into his pulling guard or completely miss the running lane. Eventually, Lombardi asked him why is he having so much success running to the right and not to the left. Higgins said because it's dark on the left, but on the right he could see the sun's reflection and run to daylight. Coach Lombardi laughed and said, well, let's run to daylight for the rest of practice. And that's how Lombardi's famous run to daylight concept was created.
This is the most important play we have, and it's the play that we will run again and again.
This concept helped create another concept called zone blocking.
There's a seal here and a seal here, and try to run this play in the alley. If the end has the linebacker taken in, he will come around it and seal inside.
The offensive lineman would block an area and not necessarily a particular defensive player.
There's a lot of things that have to happen for the play to work well.
Webster takes a pitch out and swings around the right flank on his yard pickup.
Lombardi taught his running backs to run towards any hole that was created.
And we adjust to where the defense goes, so the defense is almost always wrong, and the back will run to daylight.
The run to daylight strategy was so effective because it put unwanted pressure on the middle linebacker by taking away clear paths to the ball carrier. Keep in mind, linebackers, especially in the 4-3 defense, has to rely on the defensive tackles to keep blockers away. That's why most 43 defenses will invest in the strongest and biggest defensive tackles that they can find in order to free up the linebackers.
Records a classic shot of the Giants' marvelous Mel triplet.
The middle of the field was oftentimes wide open for opposing receivers. In order to stop passes from going over the middle, Landry created the 4-3 defense and the traditional 43 middle linebacker. The first middle linebacker in American football history was Sam Huff. Landry put Huff 2 yards in front of the defensive line in the middle of the field. As a result, the Giants tore through the league that season, winning the NFL championship versus the Chicago Bears.
The New York Giants win professional football's biggest prize.
By the time the 60s came, Landry and Lombardi were head coaches on the opposite side of the field, and Lombardi's run to daylight strategy was eating the NFL alive. Teams couldn't stop it. What made Lombardi's run offense so difficult was that it was chaotic. The run designs didn't have a predestination, and the defenses at the time were only predisposed to design runs. To be honest, it was a brilliant concept. In 1960, Landry and Lombardi faced each other for the first time in their careers.
At City Stadium in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the Cowboys played the eventual Western Conference champion Green Bay Packers.
Lombardi's run to daylight strategy dominated Landry's 43 defense. Jim Taylor ran for 121 yards along with 3 touchdowns. Green Bay had a total of 165 yards on the ground. Because Dallas couldn't stop the run, they had to run blitzes, which of course opened up passing lanes and made the play action more effective. Green Bay had a total of 165 yards on the ground. The score was a blowout. In 1964, they faced each other again. Same story, same ending. Bart Starr threw for 3 touchdowns. After that game, Landry went back to the drawing board. It was apparent that if Landry was going to do anything in the NFL, he had to find a way to stop the best rushing attack in the league. Keep in mind, teams all around the league were starting to adopt Lombardi's run to daylight strategy. It was a concern for Landry, who saw the bigger picture. The war wasn't against Lombardi, but his concept. so he dialed in for weeks to come up with the right defense to stop the best rushing attack in football history.
As we moved into the 60s, the offenses were able to influence the 4-3 and keep us from doing the things we did in the 50s.
One of the weaknesses of the 4-3 defense was the ability for guards or even tight ends on a double team block to come in and get to the middle linebacker and seal that off.
We're trying to run this play in the alley.
Coach Landry's flex defense was designed with the intent, number one, of keeping the middle linebacker free.
The flex defense was centered around the most dominant defensive tackle in the league, Bob Lilly. Bob Lilly and Jethro Pugh were the flex players.
Of two defensive linemen tight to the line of scrimmage with two defensive linemen off the line of scrimmage.
One half of the line played the 43 inside, while the other half played the 43 outside.
We just try to offset some of our linemen to give us in a better position to control the types of blocking that they use today.
Whoever was the defensive tackle on the weak side would be head up with the guard on the line of scrimmage, whereas the tackle on the other side would be 3 feet back off the line of scrimmage. The defensive end, instead of lining up just on the outside shoulder of the offensive tackle, would be lined up directly in front of the tackle, but oddly 3 back off the line of scrimmage. The job of both the defensive end and the defensive tackle was to key in on the offensive guard. This concept was brilliant because it raised problems for Lombardi's famous sweep run. When the guard pulled, as he oftentimes did, the center's job was to cut back and block whoever the defensive tackle was. But the flex raised a problem because the center couldn't get to Lilly fast enough. Keep in mind, Lilly was directly on the line of scrimmage right in front of the pulling guard. So when the guard pulled, Lilly would run right behind him, making the center who was blocking of no effect. The Packers running back couldn't make the cutback to run to daylight because Lilly would be on his rear end.
2nd and 12. Lilly, with good pursuit, came over from the right side.
What made the flex even more unusual and complex was, other than a few positions, most of the players didn't rush after the ball carrier. They all stayed in their lane. This was a huge problem versus the zone offense. It was the first time in NFL history that the swarm concept was not preached by a professional head coach. All the Cowboys players did was stay disciplined in their gaps and waited until the play came to them. Strong safety Mike Gecker and linebackers Edwards, Jordan, and Howley would oftentimes creep down to the line of scrimmage to cause confusion and either play man or zone coverages on passing plays, while cornerbacks Cornell Green, Warren Livingston, and free safety Mel Renfro would play the man concept at the back end. Another important aspect of the flex defense, and probably the most important one, was designed to keep the middle linebacker Leroy Jordan clean from blockers. Because Landry had 2 defensive linemen off the line of scrimmage, it was hard for blockers to get a clean block, thus leaving Jordan free and clean to pursue the running back. Leroy Jordan was the Sam Huff of the flex defense.
We've got to keep the big men off of him a little bit, and we think the flex does that.
It didn't take long for Jordan to make 3 Pro Bowls in a row and establish himself as one of the premier middle linebackers in the NFL. In 1965, Landry would get the chance to try out his new scheme on his old friend and new nemesis Vince Lombardi, who had the 5th ranked running back in football. Keep in mind, Landry came up with this scheme in 1964, but it wasn't perfected until 1965. Up until 1965, Lombardi dominated Landry's original 4-3 defense. The flex defense was a different story. Paul Hornung and Jim Taylor combined for 61 yards on the ground. The 6-0 Packers scored 13 points. Although the Cowboys lost, I think it's an understatement, but the mad scientist left the game knowing that he discovered possibly the only defense that could challenge the best rushing attack in NFL history.
It's alive!
Landry and Lombardi wouldn't meet up until next season in the NFL championship game. During the championship, the flex defense stopped Lombardi's rushing attack again, but Bart Starr killed Dallas' defense in the passing game, throwing for 4 touchdowns. He had a 143.5 quarterback rating, but believe it or not, Bart Starr and Lombardi's offense wasn't the reason why Dallas lost that game. The defense wasn't perfect by any means, but what lost the game was the #1 leading offense in the league, who failed on every opportunity to win the game. Dallas had 3 costly turnovers, including a muffed punt that led to a touchdown. Dallas failed to score a touchdown even though they were in the Packers' red zone 4 times. Also, Bob Hayes made a horrible decision when he fielded a punt return on his own 1-yard line.
Meredith still hasn't found his passing touch,
and runs his string of incompletions to 7.
I'm Ray Scott. I'll be calling the plays for you during the first half of today's game.
Next season, in one of the most famous championship games in sports history, Dallas once again kept the Packers offense at bay. I know all about the famous Bart Starr quarterback sneak at the 1-yard line.
Starr begins the count. Takes the snap. He's got the quarterback sneak and he's into the touchdown.
But if you look back at the game, the freezing weather temperatures, along with the Packers defense, made Landry's offense incompetent the entire game. Dallas only scored one offensive touchdown, and that was on a Dan Reeves halfback pass in the fourth quarter, while Dallas defense gave up just 21 points, along with a defensive touchdown and 2 forced fumbles. Keep in mind, Dallas defense was so dominant that they had a shutout in the second half up until seconds to go in the game. The flex defense did a pretty good job considering the circumstances. For years, the media always seems to push the narrative that Landry's Achilles heel on defense was Lombardi's offense. But when Landry created the flex defense after their first 2 matchups, that Achilles heel was no longer a factor. The real matchup was Landry's offense versus Phil Bankston's defense. From 1960 to 1967, Landry had problems with Bankston's defense. Bankston used what's called a stacking principle by pinching his tackles inside in order to keep blockers off of Reinitsky. This concept allowed Willie Wood to roam the middle of the field. Because they had Herb Adderley, who could man up on the island, the middle of the field was closed, which was an important key to Landry's success on offense. In 5 games versus Bankston, Landry's offense only scored 6 touchdowns. Don't get me wrong, Don Meredith was a Cowboy legend, but I always wondered what would have happened if Landry had Roger Staubach and the shotgun spread offense against the Packers defense in the 60s. Landry did it again. His flex defense changed the game. If you count from 1965, which was the time that he perfected the flex concept, to 1979, Dallas was top 10 in defense. That's an NFL record, 16 straight seasons. Absolutely amazing. The mad scientist Tom Landry created a full-out assault on Lombardi's run-to-daylight philosophy, and it worked. From 1965 to 1967, Landry's defense versus Lombardi's rushing attack never again allowed a 100-yard rusher, and Lombardi's offense never scored more than 27 points. Keep in mind, new moderations of the zone defense came from the flex, especially when it came to zone blocking runs that was similar to Vince Lombardi's run-to-daylight concept. Although the design of the flex itself was difficult and teams hardly ever used it, the philosophy to play a particular area was a brilliant concept that revolutionized the run defense. By the time the 80s came around, teams discovered the flex kryptonite, the weak side defensive end. When teams saw the flex defense, they immediately passed the ball. The weak side defensive end, it basically was like defending a 3-man front versus a 4-3 defense, which was, weird. Keep in mind, the flex defense was originally created to stop the run during the heavy run style 60s. But in the 80s, the league evolved to a passing league and the flex defense was nullified. In reality, it was all kind of prophetic in a way, because Landry's own brilliance when he created the shotgun spread in the 70s to counter his flex defense backfired and became his own downfall. Landry was forced to blitz more than he ever did to generate more pressure, but that made the defense a high-risk, low-reward unit. Landry kept his flex defense up until he retired and was never able to fully adapt to the times. Yet still, the flex defense was one of the greatest defensive concepts in league history that mystified an entire generation and went to war with one of the greatest rushing concepts in NFL history. Until next time, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and as always, thanks for watching.